Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here and you like the artists and musicians that I visit with on this channel, please be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. Greg Herriges is an American musician, singer, songwriter, author, and professor. During the 60s, Greg would play in various garage groups. In 1973, he would form the band Athanor with childhood friend Rick Vittenson. See my recent interview from December 21st. Several recordings were made from 1973 to 1977, and a few tracks have found their way onto various artist collections, but no albums until 2013 and 2014, when the Spanish label Guerrsen would release two CDs, Flashback in 2013, and the following year Inside Out, the demos 1973 to 1977. Greg and Rick would begin playing and recording again and released a new Athanor album, Hills of the Universe, in 2018. Aside from his music career, for many years, my guest has been a professor of English at Harper College, where he has also taught classes on rock and roll history. And let's not forget Mr. Herriges' work as an author of novels and short stories, as well as releasing a series of literary DVD documentaries. Well, welcome, Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Thank you for being here and thanking you for taking time out to do this.
Oh, it's my great pleasure.
And I hope that fire behind you keeps you warm.
It's very. I'm in Wisconsin, and it's very cold. And it's coming your way.
Yeah, I was going to say I was tempted to get a marshmallow and try to stick it in there. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Evanston, Illinois. I grew up in Highland Park, which is where Rick grew up. And my dad was a vice president of a bank. And it was the 50s. I had two older teenage sisters who one was 6 years older, one was 10 years older, and they would feed me these 45 RPM records from the time I was 7 years old. I think my first song was "Poor Little Fool" by Ricky Nelson.
Okay, all right.
Ricky never wanted to record that song. His father, Ozzy, said, "You've got to record it. It's going to be number one." And Ricky didn't like the song, but he recorded it and was his first number one hit.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to date myself here. I'm a few years younger, but the Royal Guardsmen were my first. Do you remember them with Snoopy versus the Red Baron?
You know, the funny thing that you should mention that is that Dick Holler is the author of that song. And he also wrote Abraham Martin and John for Dion.
Dion, right. Oh, that's right. You're right.
Dick Holler did two other songs for Dion, Sanctuary and Natural Man.
Yeah.
So Dion had a connection with him and with unwittingly with the Royal Guardsmen.
Royal Guardsmen, yeah. They were kind of a gimmick, a group, but they had some nice material they wrote themselves too, found on
yes.
Not just
well, a hit's always a hit.
There you go. That's right. Well, you mentioned you had older siblings, so I'm sure they were influential in their 45s.
Yeah, I mean, Buddy Holly, Dion and the Belmonts, the Everly Brothers, whatever group did Silhouettes, I can't remember who they were, but I mean, I listened to this stuff all the time. And Roy Orbison, it was. Oh, yeah. I was hooked on rock and roll by the time I was 7 years old.
Okay, you were already hooked.
Yeah.
Well, what was the first musical instrument you learned to play?
Guitar.
Okay.
My mother and father had a guy come to my house once a week from some big company, and I rented a big guitar from him, and he taught me how to read music. I was really reading music. I was playing it from the charts. And this went on for about a year, and then I said, my fingers hurt. I'm getting sick of this. And he's teaching me songs like Birmingham Jail, and I hate it. Why can't he teach me something like, Think It Over by Buddy Holly, but he didn't know those songs. So I quit. But when the Beatles came on Ed Sullivan on February 9th, 1964,
Yeah,
I had to get a guitar. I said to my dad, I said, I need an electric guitar. My parents had split by then. But I still talk to my dad at his office every day. I said, I need an electric guitar. And he got me one for my birthday just a couple of months later. And that's when I started, I started writing songs as soon as I remembered how to play,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that story too, taking lessons and, piano lessons and violin and even guitar. It's a little restricting, and you want to kind of branch out and do your own thing. But it's good.
Often,
Go ahead. It's a good
I was
foundation.
going to say, oftentimes that's the case. And
Yeah.
it's something that I remembered when I became a teacher, because I started out as an inner city high school teacher. This kid from the suburbs goes to the inner city, and boy, was that a mind explosion. It was like, there were drugs and poverty and guns and death and neglect and every social ill. And I came from this cushy little Highland Park neighborhood, which we were quite well off, and it was a real lesson in humanity. And so, yeah, so all that got mixed into it.
Yeah. We have a Highland Park here in Dallas too.
I know you do.
I imagine it's similar, pretty middle or upper middle class, or really nice houses there for sure. Well, how about some other, bands and musicians that you started getting into as a teenager?
Well, we had, Kinks, but the Beatles were the big one. I mean, the Beatles, it was that the Rick and I think both feel this way. You could check with him. I think he's already told you this. The Beatles were everything. Jeff Murphy even says, to this day, that was the epiphany, Ed Sullivan, February 9th. And boy, everything changed from that time on, because now they're writing their own songs. It's like, oh, you can write your own songs, And then being in Highland Park, I got to know people from the Delvettes. They had a song called Last Time Around. And then they changed their name to the Pride and Joy, and they had a song called Girl. They on Dunwich Records. Jimmy Sands of the Shadows of Night,
Yes.
Who I've known, well, he's gone now. The Mauds, Jimmy Rogers had a hit with Sam and Dave's Hold On, I'm Coming. The Shadows of Night did Gloria, Gloria. And I did a rock and roll documentary about Chicago bands called Player a Rock and Roll Dream. And we interviewed Jimmy Sands, and we interviewed the Crying Shames, Jim Pilster, Jimmy Rogers of the Mauds. These were guys that I kind of knew when I was young, but got to know when I did the documentary. Jimmy Sands used to come to my Beatles class and sing Gloria every year. It was
I talked with both Tom Duty and then also Ray Graffia, and he talked about how these other bands were competition at the time, and they didn't like each other, but in more recent years, doing these tours, these oldies tours, getting to know them, and how he wishes that they had been closer. He said, I missed out on a friendship here because at the time we couldn't be. We were in competition. He said, but these are some good people, So
yes,
interesting to hear those stories. Yeah.
Well, and there was this whole, rock and roll culture, which I kind of fell out of when I became an academic, when I got serious about school, because I was a terrible high school student, but I was an honor student in college. And because I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I weighed 125 pounds, and I think the rifle weighed more than I did.
You did.
I was scared, I just, and I had this humanities teacher. I moved to Florida with my father in Fort Lauderdale in 1967. And I went to Fort Lauderdale High School. And I had a humanities teacher named Larry Stock, who taught me paintings and architecture and books like Goethe's The Sorrows of Young Werther and Camus' The Stranger and Candide by Voltaire, Prince, Machiavelli. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy's blowing my mind. I got to be like him. And that's where I got the idea to be an English teacher.
Back at that time. Wow.
Yeah. He changed my life.
Wow. Well,
and I got to speak to him later on, just before he died when I was older. I just called him up one day. I looked up his number on the internet and I said, hello, Larry, is this you? And he said, why, who's this? I said, it's Greg Herriges. He said, you're kidding. I've got all your books.
Wow, that's something else. Yeah. That it kind of went, full circle kind of
It did.
like that.
And then my son has become an English teacher too, and he's a writer. So
yeah, passing that gene on.
Wow.
Wow.
As I said, it's role model identification, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what was the name of your very first band?
The Fortigo.
Okay.
Rick and I were both in the Fortigo, and we were very big in Highland Park and Highwood. We played at a club called The Sound in Highwood every Friday night. And I don't know if Rick was with me at this point. I don't think he was. It was my girlfriend's mother's place. It was they did folk songs on the weekend. On Friday nights, they did rock and roll. And I didn't realize it at the time, but Sam Giancana had bought it for her.
Oh.
And Sam Giancana was a mob guy. I don't want to get off to him.
Oh, okay.
But I think he's gone. So
maybe safe.
This guy, he's pork pie hat. He used to come in every weekend and collect the money. As soon as everybody paid their cover fee, he'd be out with the money. And I said, who is that guy? And my girlfriend said, oh, he's having an affair with my mother.
Oh boy.
I've been in the rock and roll business a long time. I've been around.
You've got some stories, and hopefully we'll hear some today. Well, I don't know if I'll pronounce this one right. Is it Dithon Norgal or Dithon Norgal?
Dithan Norgel.
Dithan Norgel.
Where did you get that?
And the Killing Times.
Yes, I was in a group called the Killing Times, and I just came up with this name, Dithan Norgel.
Dithan Norgel.
And so my first record was Heartbreaking Child, Dark City Corner on Gulfstream Records in Hollywood, Florida. And it was a legitimate label. It was a terrible record because I was only 16 when I recorded it. I didn't know how to make records then. Okay. I've gotten pretty good since then.
Okay.
Well, I know how to make a record.
That's what I was going to say. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Dithan Norgel. See, I chopped that one all up. Okay. And where did the name? Did it just come out of the air?
I was sitting in study hall one day at Fort Lauderdale High School, and it just sounded very British and weird. And I thought, oh, well, I'll use that one. And we'd made connections with this guy who owned the company, and I said, hey, do you want the songs? And he said, sure. And
wow. Now,
so I was 17 or 18 when my first record came out, but it wasn't a very good record.
Okay. Now, wouldn't that have freaked you out a little while later if somebody had called you up and said, hello, this is Dithan Norgel. Where did you get the okay to use my name?
Yeah, why did you take my name?
Somebody could have played
a
practical joke on you. Oh God. Oh man. Okay.
I'm surprised you know that. I don't know.
That's in Discogs. You know the website Discogs?
Yes.
I don't know if you're. It is listed on there. It is listed as the first single. Yeah. Your first single.
I was just a kid.
Yeah. Well, fast forwarding a few years, you and Rick formed Athanor.
Yeah.
In 73, was it? 1973?
Yeah, I was in graduate school. I was already teaching inner city high school. I had a townhouse in Highland Park. I was married to a girl named Kara who drummed with us for a while. She was a drummer on I Don't Mind, Your Reason, and she also drummed on Read Me and Memory, our 2 second singles. And we were a stopping off point for anybody who was a musician. Or our townhouse was, we had cinnamon incense going all the time. We were hippies.
Yeah.
And we had, I had just gotten my first teaching job. So for the first time in my life, I actually had money and I could buy guitars and amplifiers and recording equipment. And I built a home studio right in that townhouse.
Okay.
A TX 3340, 4-track machine, which many of the songs on the second album on Guerrsen were from that machine. And
oh, is that right?
Okay. We recorded them right at home. Rick would come over and we just turn on the machine.
Okay. All right. So you were a little into technophile even back then, a little bit.
Yeah, Jeff Murphy and I both had the same machine, and we didn't know each other at the time. He was about 4 years younger than I am. But we both had that same machine. It changed our lives. I think Black Vinyl Shoes, his landmark album, was recorded in his flat on a TX 3340. And you could do amazing things at home at that time if you had that kind of equipment. And I had a custom-made mixing board as well. So, I was a do-it-yourself guy.
Yes. Wow. Well, Rick said that you could probably give a little more detailed description of the meaning behind the name Athanor.
And I'm going to put my reading glasses on.
Okay.
Can I show you something?
Yes, please.
This is a chapbook called Athanor by Penelope Rosemont, who was a surrealist poet. And I bought it at Barbara's bookstore in Chicago.
Wow.
And I love
the cover. I just want to say the cover kind of reminds me of MC Escher a little bit.
Yes.
His it's kind of.
So I'm going to read you the definition of Athanor. Now, most people know Athanor as the name of a mechanism that takes base metals and turns them into gold. Okay. But according to Louis Spence of the Encyclopedia of Occultism, Athanor is an occult hill surrounded by mist, and it has a well, and the bottom of the well is covered with red arsenic. Near it is a basin filled with fire from which rises a livid flame, odorless and smokeless, and never higher or lower than the edge of the basin. Also, there are 2 black stone reservoirs in which one is the wind and the other is the rain. In an extreme drought, the rain cistern is opened, clouds escape, which water the whole country. That's Louis Spence.
Wow.
And so I thought, that's a pretty good name for a group. So,
yeah, I like that. You want to steer clear of that. You don't want to fall into that.
No, but by the way, Penelope Rosemont was a wonderful poet. The poems are actually beautiful. Yeah. And so I still have several copies of that chapbook, which she published. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. Going into a little more in depth there, because Rick said, talk to Greg about that. Yeah.
I heard that.
Yes. Well, who else filled out the band?
Well, in for our first couple of singles, we had David Winogrand on drums, which he's part of Brevity and Skoushny, and I knew David well, and Mark introduced me to him, and Mark had a lot to do with our first single, Inner Space and Graveyard. I even gave him production credits on it because he helped me arrange the song. And I had made the song too long, and he said, just skip the third verse. I said, oh, okay, just go to the lead solos. Like, okay. Mark was a sweetie. We were good friends since we were 14. We met our freshman year. David Winogrand, John Bunkelman on bass, I'm trying to think of the name of the lead guitarist. The software's down. Well, I'll come up with it in a while. But he was a great surf guitarist, and then he played this great lead on Graveyard, which everybody still goes gaga over. And then later on, when Rick and I formed the band Athanor to do the Hills of the Universe, we had John Belpedio on bass. Rick had been playing with John. John's a great bass player. Chris Drehobel, who used to play with the Mods, a Chicago 60s soul group.
Okay.
Harry Reinhardt, who's the father of Haley Reinhardt, who was an American Idol star 12 years ago.
I recognize that name, yeah.
Haley, she was a student of mine.
Oh, okay.
In my Beatles class. And she was this petite little girl, 18 or 19 years old, who used to sit in the front seat, very demure with her hair in a bun or braids. And she got A's on everything she did, very bright. One day, I was walking back to my office in the liberal arts building, and she came behind me. She said, "Mr. Herriges, Mr. Herriges." And I turned around. Her hair's all glammed out, and she's wearing these fabulous clothes. She said, "I just passed the audition at American Idol. I'm going to Hollywood."
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I took her to a cafe right outside the hallway, and I bought her coffee, and we sat down for a half hour. She said, "Help me think of Beatles songs that I can sing on the show." And she said, "I want to do Helter Skelter." And I thought, you might want to rethink that.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
But I didn't know how she could. At that point, I had a little bit of an idea of how well she could sing, because we sang the Beatle band video game in our Beatles class together, and she was doing thirds and fifths. And I said, "Where did you learn how to sing like that?" And she said, "Well, my parents are old hippies, and I've been singing with their band all my life." And then I saw her father play with her on American Idol. They were doing a Led Zeppelin song. Harry was amazing. And because I'm in Lake Geneva right now, we live here half time. And we were at the Lake Geneva hot dog stand by the library and by the Riviera, right on the beach, one summer, my wife and I. And there were these two teenage girls in front of us, or they looked like teenage girls. And they were ordering hot dogs and taking a long time, saying, "Well, I'm going relish on this one." And I'm thinking, huh. And my wife nudges me, and she said, "That girl just said that's Mr. Herriges." And I looked at the girl, and she had these big Elton John sunglasses on. I said, "Hello." And she was twirling this golden necklace. It said Haley. I said, "Haley, is that you?" Big hug. Sister Angie, big hug. I met her for the first time. My wife's hugging them. And then I met Harry, her father, and her mother, Patty. And I said, "Harry, I've always wanted to meet you." I said, "You're one of the best guitar players I've ever heard in my life." And so when Angie took the younger Reinhardt sister took my class, I said, "Would you ask your father if he'd give me his cell phone number? Because I'd like him to play on my album." She said, "Well, I'll give it to you right now." I said, No. You have to ask him first to make sure it's okay." And she came back, and I had the number. I said, "Harry, would you play on the album?" He's been playing with us ever since.
Wow.
So John Belpedio, Chris Drehobel, Harry Reinhardt, and our wonderful engineer, John Towner, who plays keyboards, and our sax player, who also plays flute. If you listen to Nowhere Left But the Sea, Quent Lang, who also played with the Mods. Quent Lang played on that. He also played on several songs in Hills of the Universe. He played on our Christmas song, "I Remember You on Christmas," which was on Big Stir Records. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about how you and Rick typically wrote songs together.
We didn't. I wrote all the songs.
Okay. Okay.
And then he wrote one song called Memory.
Okay.
And then he wrote a bridge to one of my songs called Oh, it's on Hills of the Universe. I might have to go over to my stereo. Oh, it was called Destiny.
Okay, Destiny. Okay.
And he said, that song's too short.
Uh-huh.
And he was right. It was like 2 minutes and 11 seconds.
Uh-huh.
And so he came back to me and he had the bridge and it was great. So we wrote that song together.
Okay.
He also, in the early days, wrote a really good rocker called I See the Light, which we never got on tape because I didn't have my studio at the time.
Uh-huh.
And gosh, I wish we had recorded that song because it was a really good rocker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you don't know, it wasn't an acetate.
We never wrote together.
Yeah. Okay.
Like Lennon.
Not collaborating like that. Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, so the band did trek on till what, 77? 19, I believe, around 70.
I think we broke up around 75 and then we got back together.
Okay.
I had recorded 2 songs with a Beatles impersonation group or tribute group called American English. And oh my God, 2 deer just ran through my backyard.
Oh, wow.
The 2 songs were Wonder Why I'm Sick and Rock Me, Roll Me. And they ended up on our first album. Rick, I called in Rick because I said, hey, we've broken up, but we're adults now, we can get back. I said, could you help me with the harmonies on this song? And he came in and we did the harmonies at Head and West Studios in Palatine, Illinois. And he also put down organ tracks on both songs. And that's when we sort of got back together.
Okay. All right. All right. So the magic was still there, and it has been.
We've known each other forever.
Right.
He's a good guy and a very talented artist.
Yes. Yes. Well, you both are. You can, Patrick. You can do a little of this. That's okay. I can't reach, right? Well, all right. Now talk about how you came into the orbit of J.D. Salinger.
J.D. Was a literary idol of mine from the time I was 16. I'd read Catcher in the Rye, and I felt like I was Holden Caulfield. I'm just going to adjust this a little bit.
Sure.
And so I taught his book in my high school classes. I taught the Catcher in the Rye, and I read all of his other stuff. And Rick and I were lucky enough to get his unpublished works because somebody came by a bookstore he was working at and unloaded a trunk full of these unpublished stories of J.D. Salinger. So I studied Salinger, and I started writing. I started writing fiction. And the girlfriend I had at the time, we were both English teachers in the same high school. And we were reading the New York Times one Sunday, and she said, oh, look, J.D. Salinger's agent, Dorothy Olding, just said he writes every day on his farm in Cornish, New Hampshire. She had unwittingly given away his address, and he was a hermit.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
She's not going to work. She's not going to work for the CIA anytime soon. Wow. So I said, we could go there.
Yeah.
And I had just published my first article in the Chicago Tribune magazine about gangs. It was a 3-page spread in the Chicago Tribune Sunday magazine. And these were my students. This is where I learned about gangs. And I called up Charlie Rose and said, would you put us on your show? I got an article about gangs. He said, oh, we want to do a show about gangs. So that Friday, I took my gang members, and my girlfriend took her car. I took my car. We took all the gang kids to WLS Studios in Chicago, ABC. And they did an hour-long show about my article, which was going to be published the next day. Yeah. It was called Inherit the Streets. And Charlie Rose was very kind to me. And he said, is this your first article? I said, and I was nervous. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
And I said, yes, it's my first article. He said, are you going to celebrate? I said, as soon as I get out of here. He said, that's what I did. He said, I celebrated all night. So my girlfriend and I went out to every bar and restaurant in Chicago. Everybody knew who I was because it was 17 million people saw this show, and I was wearing a very distinctive brown leather jacket, sport coat, and turtleneck, and yeah, we made a big splash. They had to do 3 reruns of the Tribune magazine because it sold out.
Oh,
The Tribune magazine used to come out on Saturday at noon. They
Yeah.
sold out. They sold out at noon. They had to do 3 more runs, and that helped me. And so then I was able to do things like go visit Salinger, and we did. And we ran into a woman in Cornish, New Hampshire, who used to babysit for his children, Ethel Nelson. And she drew me a map to his house. And so I sent him a letter because I knew he got his mail at the Windsor post office in Windsor, Vermont, which is 6 miles away. You cross the longest covered bridge in America, from New Hampshire across the Connecticut River into Vermont. And I dropped off a letter. I spent hours on this letter. I had a little portable typewriter with me because there were no computers back then. And I gave it to the postman. It was addressed to Jerome David Salinger. I said, will he get this? And he was a very grave looking guy with a tie. He looked like he was manufactured by the post office.
Okay.
And he just nodded gravely at me. And then we went off. I gave him 3 days notice. We went off to Seabrook, New Hampshire to an anti-nuclear rally. They were building a nuclear power plant. And we heard on the radio that Jackson Browne and Pete Seeger and Arlo Guthrie were going to be there. And so we went there. And I had my press pass from the Chicago Tribune. And I got to interview all 3 of them. So this is very impressive to my girlfriend, right? I mean, it's like, oh my God, he just introduced me to Jackson Browne, Arlo Guthrie, and Pete Seeger. Right. And then the next day she met J.D. Salinger. She must have thought I was magic or something. And I was starting to think I was magic. It's like, how did this happen? Salinger came out of his house. It was a house with no doors.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's how much he didn't want the public bothering him. It was his second house. The first house was down the road, but he got divorced and he owned the entire mountain. So he built his house so he could watch his kids grow up. And that's where we visited him. We got a very nice photograph of his first house. And he, we pulled into the driveway, and the one door there was this flip-flop.
I'm going to ask you about that. Yeah. Yeah. How did he get in the house? Yeah.
There was a spiral staircase, and his dogs came down. I was warned that he had really vicious dogs, and they tried to eat the car. I mean, we rolled up our windows. I mean, this is you didn't have automatic windows. You had to roll them up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the garage door goes up. There was a garage door, and there was a beige BMW, a black Jeep, and this man in a powder blue Ivy League short sleeve shirt with gray slacks walks out. He's very tall, stands very erect. And he walked out between the 2 cars, and the dogs sort of fell in at his sides. And now they were all friendly. And I rolled down the window. He said, "Are you the man who wrote the letter?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yes, I'm Greg Herriges." He said, "It was a very amusing letter." I said, "Thank you." I meant it to be, I knew I could get to him if I could crack him up.
Yeah.
And he said, "Are these the terrible beasts you were so afraid of?" Because I told him in the letter, "Please, I'm afraid of dogs. I hear you've got some very, and I understand you have a shotgun, so please don't shoot at me, Mr. Salinger. If you want me to leave, I'll just go." And he talked to us for 20 minutes. It was just, and I assembled everything he said from memory back at my campsite, because there was no hotel to stay at in Cornish, New Hampshire. So I had to, type the whole thing out. And yeah, I had a really good transcript of our conversation and brought it to the Chicago Tribune magazine. That was my publisher.
Wow. Did you find once you broke the ice a little bit, was he pretty personable,
Yes, he was a very nice man. He was very kind to me, and he did get strict with me at one point. He said, contact with the public interferes with my writing. I said, I understand that. He said, no, I don't think you do, because if you did, you wouldn't be here.
Oh, okay.
And I said, all right, if you want us to leave, I'll be happy to go. He said, no, you seem like nice people. Why don't you just ask me your questions? But I had to be very careful about the kind of questions I asked him because, you could scare off JD with, the wrong question. He might not want to, I'm adjusting again. He might not want to answer. So I was a little circumspect. I was
Cautious, yeah.
But we left on good terms, and then the Tribune didn't. They said, "Well, you'll have to rewrite it." And I said, "Well, why?" And they said, "Well, it's not journalistic style." I said, "Well, I'm not a journalist. This is a tribute to my hero." "Well, we can't have that." I said, "Well, then you can't have the article." And so I sold it to Hefner for triple the money.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It worked out.
Oh, and then they bought one of my first short stories. They published that too.
Did they?
So I was on my way to publishing at that point. That rock and roll was a distant memory.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say you had to play a little hardball there. Well, back to music briefly. Talk about singing on stage with Dion.
I met Dion when I was 19 at a place called The Quiet Night on Belmont in Chicago. And I saw his show, and I walked up to him as he was walking off stage. I said, "Dion, can I talk to you?" He said, "Yeah, come on back." But in his dressing room, he had like 14 other people. And I thought to myself, this is not the right venue. I don't want to do this conversation like that. And Rick was very instrumental in getting me to meet Dion.
Okay.
Rick used to write articles for Al Rudis at the Chicago Sun-Times, a music editor. And he was supposed to cover the Dion and Frank Zappa concert. Dion was opening from Zappa, and that's a really strange combination. But
that's very strange. Yeah,
they had the same manager, Zach Littman.
Okay.
And he said, "Would you do it?" I said, "Are you kidding? My hero?" So I got to meet Dion, and we talked for an hour and a half. And it was one of those backstage things where all the food and booze is around. And I even gave him a copy of our first single, Inner Space. And he put it in his guitar case. He was very kind to me. I asked him, "Have you ever met the Beatles?" He said, "No, I never met any of them." I said, "If you could meet a Beatle, which one would it be?" He said, "John." He said, "Because he's so honest. He's so honest it could help him or hurt him. I can't tell." And then later on, he was coming to Chicago to play a concert at the Ivanhoe Theater. And I thought, let's call his manager and try to book him on AM Chicago. Because I had links to AM Chicago at that point. And so I called up AM Chicago. And I said, "Would you be interested in having Dion on the show?" And they said, "Yes. Can you put us in touch?" I said, "Yes, but first I've got to call his manager and I'll put him in touch with you." So I called Zach. I had Zach's number. And I said, "Zach, would you like to put Dion on AM Chicago the morning of his concert?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, can I get an interview with him?" I said, "I'll put you in touch with him if you give me the interview." He said, "Yeah, you got the interview." So it happened. I was at the taping of the show. Again, AM Chicago, ABC Studios in Chicago. And then the Warner Brothers guy said, "Would you have breakfast with him and take him back to the hotel?" I said, "Sure."
Yeah. Don't have to ask twice.
My photographer and I, had breakfast with Dion, and I interviewed him with a cassette recorder. And I carried his guitar back to my car and drove him to the hotel. He gave me free tickets to the show. So we went to the show that night. Just near the end of the show, and he said, there are two guys in the audience. It was me and my photographer. I bought breakfast for you guys. Come up here and help me on stage. And I was terrified. I have stage fright.
Yeah.
This is one thing Rick doesn't have, Rick loves.
Okay.
But every time Athanor got on stage, everybody knew, get him a drink before he goes on. So I got on stage and he's letting different people sing, why must I be a teenager in love? And he did it to me. And I did it so well, I brought the house down, standing ovation. And he gave me a low 5.
A low 5.
That night will live with me forever, I think.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, you also have a Beach Boys story, too, or two.
Yeah. Well, okay, this is because of Mark Breyer. I met the Beach Boys sound man, Jeff Peters, through Mark. And because Mark was out in California. And Jeff Peters heard Inner Space, my first single, and he wanted to mix it for me. And he did. And he had it pressed up as a single. He didn't mix Graveyard. He said, there's nothing I can do with that song. He said, it is what it is. So I knew Jeff Peters, and because of that, I got on the guest lists every time the Beach Boys were anywhere near Chicago. I mean, the first time we saw them in Wisconsin, my kid was like 5 years old. And that was nice. I didn't really know them that well, but Jeff was there. And then the next time was the Skyline Theater at Navy Pier in Chicago. And I brought my son with me. He was 11 years old. And I had bought him the new Beach Boys CD, which was their country album. And but I wanted him to have a new album so they could sign it. And Brian showed up. And by this time, I knew both their keyboard player, Mike Maros, through Mark, and of course, Jeff Peters, and they were both there. And we were backstage, and Brian shows up. And I said to my son, Jeremy, take this over there, get it signed. That's Brian Wilson. He's the leader of the Beach Boys. Because Brian never showed up to these things. And so my son went over to Brian and they talked for 20 minutes and they were eating these giant chocolate chip cookies because backstage there's all this food and crumbs are falling out of Brian's mouth. And my son came back to me after 20 minutes and he said, Dad, what's wrong with that guy?
Oh, did he?
Yeah. He was only 11.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a sad moment. Then another night they played at the Rosemont Theater in Chicago and I was there. And I got sick of the crowd at the Rosemont because there are all these little girls standing on their chairs and you couldn't see anything except their asses shaking, which was okay, but yeah, I wanted to see this.
Right.
So I went backstage and just watched it on closed circuit TV, and I was wearing shades. I was playing one of their acoustic guitars, and the show was almost over. The tour manager came backstage and said, I know you. I said, no, I don't think you do. Neil? I said, no. Neil Diamond? I took off my shades and I said, no, I'm not Neil Diamond. He said, oh, as soon as I took off the shades, he realized his mistake, And then they all came backstage and, Carl was going through chemotherapy at the time. Okay. And he had fake hair and fake eyebrows, fake sideburns. And he played the entire show on a stool. It was really, really sad. But he still had it, man. Yeah. And so they all came backstage and And Carl said, I'm tired. I'm going back to the hotel, you know. That's the last time I saw him. That might have been his last performance. Then everybody else was going out to a French restaurant. And Mark was with me. I was with Mark Bryan. And I ended up sitting next to El Jardine and talking to him. And his mother was on a tour. She was sitting next to
He
me.
was with him. Wow, wow.
And she put her hand on my hand. She said, "You boys were so good tonight." He said, "No, Mom, he's not with the band."
Neil Diamond.
Neil Diamond
Yeah.
and a Beach Boy.
What's he doing? What's he doing backstage? Playing, strumming a guitar.
Did I make this up? No.
No. But I can see now that you said that. I can, especially if you had glasses on. I can see. I can see
the Neil Diamond thing. Oh God, I get it all the time.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to continue with the Beach Boys, or did you want to move on?
No, I mean that's pretty much with the Beach Boys. Although Jeff Peters is the one who did text me the day after Mark Breyer passed away to let me know that he had gone at 5:02 a.m. Pacific time, and it broke my heart. You know, I knew he was sick, but I didn't know he was going to go that fast. And so, you know, I'm at the age where this is happening to me every year. I mean, I lose friends all over the place, and
like the guy I just talked to earlier in the UK, he's 81, and so he's staring straight at his mortality. You know, I mean, every day. So, but he talked about several of his, you know, friends and musicians he's played with over the years. You know, that have gone, and recently, you know,
yeah,
yeah,
it's a heartbreak. You know,
yeah. It's inevitable for all of us. You know.
Yeah. What are you going to do? I mean, it's mortality.
Right. That's right. You know, this we're on loan for a certain amount of time, basically. Well,
Yeah.
How about one other name dropping here? How about stories around Kurt Vonnegut?
So I had become a professor at Harper College, which took me out of the inner city and saved my life, really, from burnout. Because poverty and gangs and drugs, it wears on you, you know. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this suburban setting with 2 lakes and geese swimming in the lake, and I'm teaching Byron and Blake, and I've got these students who actually do homework, and then they put me on this committee, the Cultural Arts Committee, to bring people to the school. And a brochure came in of all the authors that were on tour, and Kurt Vonnegut was one of them. And I told the committee, I said, we've got to get Kurt. He's the guy. And they said, well, he's very expensive and this and that. I said, well, you go with a cheaper guy, and you're going to sell 300 tickets. You go with Vonnegut, people will be coming from the University of Chicago to come see him.
Yeah.
And we sold 2,100 tickets. And so they went with me. And I got to be his chauffeur, his bodyguard, his bon vivant, the guy who showed him around the college, introduced him to the college president. We had a brunch for him. We spent the day together. And he was cracking me up the entire time. But we were in the president's boardroom.
Oh.
Walls, you know, just picture a mahogany desk a mile long. You know, it's very, very posh. And he's smoking Camel cigarettes.
Yeah.
And there are these big signs on the wall that say no smoking. Okay. And I said, Mr. Vonnegut, he's call me Kurt. And he had that raspy voice. I said, well, Kurt, I said, the president takes his no smoking policy very seriously. He said, oh, that's okay. If anybody says anything, I'll tell them you tried to stop me, but I'm bigger than you are.
Right. Yeah.
But he put out the cigarette. He put up before the president came in, he put out the cigarette. And then we spent the day together. We went to dinner together. And he kept nudging. We went to a nice steakhouse. We had the liberal arts department with us, the dean, everybody, the brass. He kept knocking me in the ribs with his elbow. Hey, you want some sweet and low? Take the edge off your iced tea. Okay, thanks. He knocked me in the ribs again, saying, what are you gonna have? I said, I think I'm gonna have the filet. Me too. He knocked me in. By the time I got home, my ribs were hurting.
They were sore.
It was like it was Abbott and Costello, and I was the straight man, And then it got late, and we needed to get back to the school because there were 2,100 people waiting for us. And it was raining, and I had an umbrella, and I shielded us all the way to my car. It was a black spiffy sports car I just bought. He said, how fast will it go? I said, I don't know. He said, let's find out. We got in the car, and we couldn't get out of the restaurant parking lot because valet parkers had set up traffic cones.
Oh.
And we got stuck in the valet parking. I said, my God, we're never going to make it to the auditorium in time. He said, oh, sure we will. He said, just run over them witches' hats. That's what traffic cones.
That's what he called them, witches' hats.
So I hit the gas, but they were boom, 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 and all the traffic, the valet guys were like screaming at me. He said, my God, I didn't think you'd really do it. And I ended up at a bar that night with Kurt, and we had 2 scotches apiece. And I was signing 2 of my books to him, and he was signing 3 of his books to my family and me. He drew a picture of himself from my wife, Carmen, which she still treasures. And I went to pay for the drinks. He said, oh, no. He put my money away, put my hand down. He said, I know you're a successful writer, but I'm a more successful writer. And so he paid for the drinks.
Oh, did he?
He was a very sweet guy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a side that most people don't know,
Yeah, well, if you see him on some of the videotapes, he does come across as a very sweet man. He's a very, well, he is. See, to me, he's still around.
Yeah.
And well, I will tell you can I tell you one other thing?
Sure.
My son's a teacher, and he was teaching high school down the street from me, about a mile from where I was teaching college. And he called me during one of my 101 classes, English 101, one day. And I never answered my cell phone in a class, but it was from my son, so I thought I'd better answer it. I said, what's up? He said, hey, Pop, you sitting down? I said, no. He said, why don't you sit down? So I did. I sat down, and I said, what? He said, J.D. Salinger just passed away. Well, that was a big one. So I dismissed class. As a matter of fact, I dismissed all my classes that day, because that was, JD was a big part of my life. I wrote a book about him, about a memoir about him. I wrote the article for Hefner about him. I did studies about him. I taught Salinger classes. So that was a big one for me, Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it would impact you like that. And especially having visited him too, as well,
Yeah.
So, wow.
I got a new song.
Okay. All right.
We're doing a new song. Athanor's doing a new song called If You Want to Know the Truth.
Okay.
It's a tribute to Holden Caulfield,
Right.
from The Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
And we just did the vocals. First, we did the basic tracks, we did the vocals, and we have to go back and mix and add some percussion to it. But it should be out probably on YouTube, Spotify, everywhere by March, and then probably on International Pop Overthrow on Omnivore Records next August. They've been very good to Athanor. The last 3 volumes, 23, 24, 25, have all had Athanor songs on them.
Right, right. I was going to mention that too. I Dream of You Every Night was on 24. I think it was on the volume 24.
Yeah, did you hear it?
Yeah, yeah. And the other trio of songs ended up on the Various Artists. That one, Approximately Eternity, on Big Stir in 2021.
Yes.
And then I Don't Mind on Grapefruit. Now that's a nice label, Grapefruit. Yes, there you go. There you go.
Looking for the magic.
Looking for
We're on there.
American pop. Now, our shoes are on there too. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I see.
Which
I
is
see that.
great because, Jeff Murphy and I mean, he's my song partner now. He's
Right,
my singing partner.
right, right.
We just sang for 4 hours straight the other day. And he said, he said to me, Greg, I feel lightheaded. I've been singing so long. I said, I know, I'm ready to faint.
Uh-huh.
We
Yes.
aren't teenagers anymore.
Right, right. Exactly. Well, going back to did you want to talk about Guerrsen and how surprised you were hearing from them that they wanted to
Yeah,
re-release?
I was shocked. And
Yeah,
so we took the tapes all had to be baked before you could transfer them digitally
yeah,
because they were so old. Otherwise, the oxide comes off on the heads of the tape recorder.
yeah.
And so we took some of them to Steve Albini, who produced Nirvana. Um, he's no longer with us. He just passed away. Um, he had the only 30-inch per second half-track tape machine in the state of Illinois. And then we had them, they actually bake the tapes and then transfer them to digital. And so Rick and I worked for 4 weeks at Paragon Studios in the Fulton Market district of Chicago, um, transferring them and mastering them. And then we did the same thing with the second album. When Guerrsen signed us to a second album, they did so well with the first album. And by the way, it didn't come out just on CD; it was also 12-inch vinyl, both of them.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And they
They
did a great
sold.
job
They
with
sold out.
the
Yeah,
packaging. They did a really good job with the packaging and everything. Yeah,
yeah, they sure did.
yeah.
And then my wife and I got to meet them. They're outside of Barcelona in a little town called Lleida, which looks a little bit like Evanston, Illinois.
Does it? Does it?
We took a high-speed train there. We were there in an hour. It was like 300 miles away. We're there in an hour. And they came and picked us up at the train station, Alex and his partner, uh, Antonio, and took us to lunch and showed us around the record plant. It was really quite nice. And very good people. And by the way, they're the ones who hooked us up with Cherry Red Records, because I guess the producer there said, I'm looking for power pop from the 70s from America. And I said, well, you ought to check out Flashback by Athanor.
Yeah, yeah.
And they said, we want I Don't Mind. And so,
Right.
yeah.
That's the one they picked. Yeah. Yeah. Cherry Red is my really go-to label. They have released so much, especially the various artists
Yeah.
compilations like that. And they've got every niche covered. I mean, just when you think they've got them all covered, here comes another one, that you hadn't
Yeah.
thought of, and it's
Yeah.
just they've done a really good job, and their packaging and their liner notes and that kind of stuff is really
Amazing.
yeah. They do a lot of research, yeah, and on that.
Jeff Murphy wrote liner notes for our second album,
Yes,
Inside Out.
yeah.
So he even recorded a song with us for the second album. He did the ooze on a song that didn't come out on the tapes. It was called Roll Me Like the Ocean.
Yeah.
And we needed somebody to do the high ooze. And so Jeff came in and did those. And we recorded that whole song brand new for that album because it just didn't come out on the tapes. The tapes got messed up. And
Okay. Well, how did you and Jeff first meet? How did you guys meet?
I was making this documentary film called Player, a Rock and Roll Dream. And about Chicago rock groups from the 60s and 70s. And the producer said to me, you know, we really ought to get Jeff Murphy from Shoes. I said, who are Shoes? I didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
And here he was in Zion, Illinois, just not too far from where I lived all those years ago. We were doing the same thing, roughly the same time. So I got to meet Jeff. We went to his house, we interviewed him. And then Jeff would start coming into my Beatles class or my rock and roll class, and he would lecture about the Beatles and the production of Sgt. Pepper. And then we would play a couple of Beatles songs together, and I'd go to his house to rehearse with him. And we became, and he and his wife and me and my wife became friends. And we go to dinner, we go to lunches, and we see them all the time. That's how I got to meet Jeff Murphy. And he was playing with Athanor. Even on the Hills of the Universe album, he does vocals on Autumn Slipping Away, which is one of my favorite songs. And, that's how I got to know Jeff.
Yeah, he seems like a super nice guy too. I mean,
his brother John as well.
John, yeah. And then what's the other non-sibling in the band? What's the other member of
My software is down again. Give me a second.
Okay. I'm trying to think of who's the
I might
other.
have to call.
Gary Cleve.
Don't make me call up Jeff.
Gary Cleve. Gary Cleve.
That's exactly who it is. And I just saw Gary.
Yes.
Not too long ago.
It just came to me. Yeah.
So, all right, so your software is working.
My software is working. I did an update, I think, yesterday, early yesterday to that software. Well, that's interesting about so you're teaching, your rock and roll history, the Beatles. Did you specialize in any other bands in teaching in the history?
What do you mean?
Oh, you were talking about in your literary classes, teaching about the Beatles.
Oh yeah,
did you specialize in any other bands? Did you talk?
Yes. I taught a rock and roll class with Dr. Kurt Hammer at Harper for several years, and we covered all of rock and roll, all the way back to the blues, the early Southern blues. Robert Johnson, all the way up. Yeah. We covered everybody, and and we had guests. We had Bobby V. We had Paul Anka.
Really? They would come in. Wow.
No, they didn't come in. They phoned in.
Okay.
We had Barry Miles, the Beatles biographer. He came in twice. Marshall Crenshaw. I interviewed Marshall Crenshaw a couple of times for a British magazine called Rock Studies. It's actually a literary magazine by Taylor Francis Publishers. Yeah. And we did the entire interview, and I've been with Marshall several times, but we did the entire interview texting.
Yeah.
Because he was on the road and he was listening to Hills of the Universe as he was traveling across country, driving all the way to California, and telling me that he liked the album very much. And that was encouraging. Because Marshall's always been one of my favorites.
Oh, yes. I like his material. I like his. Yeah. Well, are any of these, the literary DVD documentaries still available?
No, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Our producer did another one with another teacher, and there was a copyright suit because there wasn't clearance, apparently. It was mostly a nuisance lawsuit, but the college settled, and so the producer decided, I'm taking these things off the market. And he didn't want any more liability, and I don't blame him.
Right.
So no, they're not, but if you'd like a copy, I'll send you one. I have a few.
There are ways around that, getting around that, huh?
Yeah. I'd be happy to send you one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if you have the time,
Yeah.
that would be, yeah.
Well, I did one with T.C. Boyle called The Art of the Story, which won platinum at the Aurora Awards in Salt Lake City. And T.C. Boyle is a great, great writer and a good friend. And he owns the only Frank Lloyd Wright Prairie house west of the Mississippi River. And I was lucky enough, with my wife, to be guests at that house several years ago.
Oh, well, yeah. That just reminded me, Frank Lloyd Wright. I love his architecture.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah, and I
it.
live right near Oak Park, where most of
Yeah,
those houses are. Yeah.
yeah. That split level. Yeah, like
Incredible stuff.
yeah, it is. It is. And yeah, that they've got to keep those, I hope they don't ever tear down any of those. Well, they probably won't because he's a national treasure.
Most
But
of them are historical sites.
yeah, I was going to say historical too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
yeah.
here in Lake Geneva,
Yeah.
many of the old houses here in Lake Geneva are also, historical sites. And
Yeah.
it's really wonderful to come up here, and because I live on a little block in the woods.
Mhm.
It's a one block street.
Yeah.
And when I'm in Illinois, I live on a busy street and there's traffic all over the place. And but
Yeah.
here there's a swimming pool and a balcony and a patio, and you can just chill out. The grandkids love coming here because
Oh, they do. I bet they do. Yeah.
they want to swim.
Yeah, not when it's negative, whatever degree.
No, not now.
Not now. In the summer, maybe. All right. Well, Greg, can you think of anything else in closing
No,
that you'd
it's
like?
just been very kind of you to be interested, and
Oh, it is. I mean,
it's fun talking about rock and roll and literature and teaching. And
oh yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy hearing your stories. That's what I told you the other night when we talked. I like for you just to go. I like to hit the record button and just let you go. You guys go at it.
well,
And
you've been very generous.
well, I appreciate it, and I get a lot out of it myself. I really do. Just hearing your stories and sharing those recollections. The guy I talked to earlier. He said you're a muso. I said yeah, yeah. That's the British way of saying yeah. I am. I'm a maven. I'm a music fan. So
There you go.
so I think I finally found something that's I don't know if you want to call it calling, but it's something I get a lot out of too. And just sharing your stories, and once we get some of the comments and finding out people you may coming out of the woodwork, you never know, people that
Sure.
will be they were there at the time, and then you find some younger fans too, especially with those re-releases and things like that too. So it's always fun. It's always fun. All right. Well, again, thank you, Greg. Very enjoyable. And
For me too.
all right. Well, that's when it
Greg.
works. That's when it works, right? When
Yeah.
we both get a little something out of it. So
Thank you so much.
all right. And I should be able to send you edited copy of this. Probably not much to edit out in a week or so, and then you can post it, wherever you'd like to, on your website, your Facebook, wherever you'd like to, and
Okay.
and you'll have a copy of it to do as you wish, and then it'll also be on my YouTube channel.
Okay, Greg. Thank you.
All right. See what kind of traction we get and responses and that kind of thing. All
Okay.
right. All right. Well, all the best to you this year, 2025.
And to you too.
All the best to you. Okay, Greg?
You too. Bye-bye.